2:17 a.m., under the crystal chandeliers of La Tour de Verre, New York's most exclusive French restaurant, a woman collapsed off the bar stool like a broken doll. No one moved to help her. Her Dior dress soaked in wine, her red heels bent sideways. Everyone stepped back, except one man, Noah Ellison, a black server, night shift number 300. Just another name no one remembered in a place that only cared if you served to standard. What he didn't know was that one small act of kindness would cost him his job. And what he could never imagine was that it would also bring down an entire restaurant empire and raise him to a place no one dared to envision. This is the story of how someone once dismissed as unfit for luxury built an empire rooted in dignity and justice. If you've ever been rejected because of your skin, your voice, or where you come from, stay. This story is for you. 2:17 a.m. Inside the shimmering space of La Tour de Verre, New York's elite French restaurant, crystal lights cast their glow over couture gowns and half-forgotten champagne flutes. In a place where everything is measured in points, prestige, and discretion, any deviation is seen as a stain that won't wash out. And then, a sound ripped through the silence like a shattered ritual. A woman slipped from her bar stool, collapsing like a rag doll. Champagne-colored Dior dress, red stilettos flung across the floor. Smudged lipstick streaked down her cheek. She lay there, trembling, on the cold marble tile. Silence. Glances. Then, averted eyes. No one moved. No one wanted to get involved. No one wanted their name in a report by morning, especially not when the woman on the floor was Celeste Belmont, only daughter of hotel tycoon Harlan Belmont. Only one man stepped forward, Noah Ellison, night shift waiter. 28 years old, black, clear-headed, and painfully aware that every move he made would be watched through a different lens, because Noah had seen it too many times. 300 nights behind the bar had taught him a hard truth. Sometimes kindness isn't seen as goodness, but as an accusation. Still, he stepped forward and gently helped her up. No one in that restaurant that night, not even Noah himself, could have imagined that her fall would be the trigger for an upheaval, and the one who'd be cast out of the game would be the man who once believed he was untouchable. Noah crouched low, carefully lifting Celeste off the cold stone floor. The moment his hand touched her shoulder, a chill of silence spread across the lobby. The whispers stopped. The glances swept past, then froze, sharp with suspicion. At La Tour de Verre, a courteous gesture could become a transgression if done by someone with the wrong skin, the wrong background, the wrong place in the world. But Noah didn't overthink it. He guided her out of sight, toward the hallway hidden behind a wall of silvered glass. There, it was just the two of them, and the suffocating space between hesitation and an unanswered question. Celeste looked up. Her blonde hair was a mess, mascara smeared beneath her eyes, but her gaze was startlingly clear. "Why did you help me?" Her voice didn't shake. "Aren't you afraid they'll fire you?" Noah didn't answer right away. He'd seen coworkers get written up for grabbing a guest's arm to stop a fall. He'd seen an Asian server suspended for standing too close to a celebrity table. And he knew. A black waiter laying hands on Celeste Belmont was not an act that earned approval. "I am afraid," Noah said, eyes steady, "but I don't leave people on the floor." Celeste paused. A flicker of surprise. Then slowly she nodded. "You're not like the others." Noah didn't know if she was drunk, but that look, it was clearer than anyone's in the dining hall, and what he didn't know was that her eyes had just begun to remember his name. not to report him, but to unlock a door he never even dreamed was there. The next morning, as Noah was changing into his day shift uniform, a junior staffer tapped him gently on the shoulder. "Manager Ethan wants to see you, immediately." The third-floor conference room had never brought good news to anyone in a waiter's uniform, and as Noah stepped in, he knew today would be no exception. Ethan Kroll, the general operations manager, leaned back in his chair like a judge. In front of him was a printed dossier, full-color stills from last night's security footage. Noah bending down to help Celeste, his hand on her back, the dim lighting casting every gesture as if it were an unwanted advance. "Do you know what's worse than a mistake?" Ethan asked, voice slick as oil, letting a camera record it. Noah sat still. "You touched a VIP guest," Ethan continued, pushing the photos across the table, "while she was in a vulnerable state. We cannot let that behavior tarnish this brand." Noah stared at the still frames and felt as if his own conscience had been photographed, then blurred. No audios, no enough to manufacture guilt. He wanted to scream, but he didn't. Instead, something else began to form inside him. Not fear, but a slow, quiet burn of righteous anger, persistent, undeniable. If I stay silent, Noah thought, then who's next? And in that moment, he knew. This wasn't the end. It was the opening shot of a confrontation he never imagined he'd have to fight. Late afternoon. Noah stood silently at his locker, unpinning the name tag from his shirt. A small piece of metal engraved with the words, "Noah Ellison, service with integrity." Cold, ironic. He was not allowed back into the restaurant. No farewell, no goodbyes, just a bag of personal items, a termination letter, and a long, aching exhale from a server who had given 3 years of his life believing that if he did everything right, he'd be seen. Noah called his mother. Ms. Laverne was mopping the night shift floor at Brooklyn Hospital. 30 years doing a job no one remembered. But when she heard her son's voice, she stopped, leaned the mop against the wall. "I got fired, Mama." "Why?" "For helping a drunk woman, and because I am who I am." Silence. Then she spoke, slowly, like wiping a stain off her son's honor. "You weren't wrong, Noah. You were just wrong to think. Someone like us is allowed to do what's right." Her words hit him like vinegar in an open wound. Not bitter, not angry, just a truth too raw to touch, etched into the blueprint of every polished floor in that restaurant. That night, Noah replayed everything in his mind. The small moments he'd once forced himself to overlook. The Haitian server reassigned after being praised by a guest. An Asian co-worker reprimanded for not being soft enough in communication. HR whispering to Ethan, "We have to maintain the upscale white image." Noah started writing things down, every day, every name, every look, because for the first time, he didn't want to forget. And for the first time, he understood. If kindness isn't protected, then justice must speak. 7 days had passed since Noah was fired. 7 days of silence, trapped between fury and helplessness, between the shame of a decent man twisted into a villain and the pain of someone with no right to defend himself. Then, at 2 a.m., a quiet message arrived. "Meet me. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., corner of 61st and Columbus. Come alone. Sender, CB." The cafe sat quietly beneath the shadow of an old building. Celeste arrived on time, dressed simply, camel coat, hair pulled back, not a trace of makeup. But her eyes, just as sharp as the first night they met. "I wasn't drunk that night," she said, cutting straight to it. "I just wanted to see if anyone in that restaurant still had a sense of decency." Noah frowned. "Why would you do that?" Celeste pulled out a slim folder, an internal finance report. Across the top, draft, Maison Group equity sale. My father, Harlan Belmont, is preparing to cash out. I suspect Ethan's cleaning up the front to boost market value. Noah understood immediately what she didn't have to say. Cleaning up meant scrubbing out every face that wasn't white, wasn't palatable, wasn't on brand. He looked at her, wary. Why are you telling me this? Celeste tilted her head, answering softly. Because in a place where everyone's playing a part, you're the only one who didn't follow the script. Her eyes were no longer vague. They were focused, steady, as if this wasn't just an explanation, but the opening move in a dangerous alliance, one that was risky, but necessary. After the meeting with Celeste, Noah didn't go home. He walked through the rain, as if trying to cool the fire inside him. But the farther he walked, the hotter his chest burned. Not from anger, but because it was time to do something he'd avoided for 3 years. Face the whole truth. The next morning, Noah opened his phone. He scrolled through the names of former co-workers who had once suddenly disappeared. The first was Tariq, a former shift manager, forced to resign for uniform violations, just because his shirt wasn't the exact shade of beige. The second was Amaya, a Jamaican-born server, reprimanded multiple times for talking too long with guests, especially guests who looked like her. Both greeted him with cautious silence. But when Noah explained he no longer worked at La Tour de Verre, that Ethan had set him up, that Celeste Belmont was now on their side, their eyes shifted. Tariq said, Ethan once told me, we need to maintain a luxury experience, which means white has to be the default. Amaya gave a bitter laugh. Every time a black guest complimented me, I got reassigned to another table. Noah sat quietly, then opened his notebook. For the first time in years, he wrote things down instead of brushing them off. Names, dates, reasons for termination, who signed the decision, the words that stuck. This time, he wasn't letting it go. This time, he was turning every fragment of injustice into to force the system to look into the eyes of every person it had tried to erase in silence. On a gloomy, rainy afternoon, Celeste brought Noah to an old office building in Soho. No signage, no receptionist, just a wooden door. And behind it, a room stacked with documents, and a woman whose eyes never blink when listening to injustice. Ramona Choi, a civil rights attorney who had forced the CEOs of 3 major U.S. hotel chains to step down after exposing systemic racial discrimination. I don't sue with emotion, she said. I sue with data, testimony, and organizational patterns. Noah sat upright, not from fear, but because for the first time he felt, maybe, he wasn't alone. Celeste laid it out. Ethan Kroll was sanitizing the system in preparation for an equity sale. People of color in front-facing roles were being gradually pushed out. Ethan was using policy violations as a cover for targeted terminations. Ramona nodded, flipping open her notebook. If we can prove a discriminatory pattern through firing data, shift changes, guest feedback, combined with testimonies from former employees, then this isn't just an internal HR issue. This becomes a federal lawsuit for systemic discrimination. The plan began. Noah became the gatherer. Ramona handled the legal groundwork. Celeste worked from within, adjusting staffing quietly, probing departments, and even planting someone inside HR. 3 people, 3 different starting points, but united by one shared conviction. They would no longer let silence protect what society called luxury standards built on skin color. Only one rule mattered now: absolute secrecy. Because if Ethan found out, this wouldn't be a strategy. It would become an open war. That night, Noah returned to his small apartment in Queens. He pulled a cardboard box from beneath the bed. A thin layer of dust coated the label. Not important. Keepsakes. But for the first time, he realized. This wasn't a box of memories. It was a black box, like the kind pulled from plane wreckage. Inside were things that once felt meaningless. Handwritten notes from guests praising his grace and kindness. A printed internal email, accidentally CC'd to him, where Ethan complained, "Our high-end clientele is being compromised by inconsistent staffing standards." Memos from shift managers with bullet points like, "Avoid assigning staff of color to VIP tables." And then, a small black USB drive. Noah had nearly forgotten he'd recorded that meeting over a year ago, the one where he was called in for letting a guest hug him in thanks. He plugged it in. Ethan's voice came through clearly. "I don't have an issue with any skin color, as long as the guests can't tell. They're paying for an experience, clean, elegant, refined, and honestly, those things, black skin doesn't deliver them." Noah sat still. That wasn't just a statement. It was living proof. A gold-jacketed bullet he'd unknowingly held onto through years of silence and survival. For the first time, he didn't shake, because for the first time, he knew. What the system thought was its secret was the very thing that would bring it down. Monday, 10 a.m. The 27th floor boardroom of Maison Group, normally reserved for billion-dollar partners, was suddenly booked for an urgent meeting on operational standards. Ethan Kroll walked in like it was any other day. Custom-tailored suit, confident smile, as if this meeting was a tribute in his honor. "We need to talk about some recent successes," he said, as he took his seat, shooting Celeste a familiar look. One of dominance. But today, Celeste didn't smile back. She sat upright, flanked by two people, a strategic shareholder representative and an Asian woman in a gray suit, Ramona Choi, introduced as a specialist in multicultural operational compliance. All eyes turned to Celeste as she began. "We've identified a troubling pattern in staffing and have invited Ethan here to provide clarity." Ethan smirked. "Pattern? Sounds like coincidence. I believe in efficiency, not quotas." Ramona tapped a button. The screen lit up with data. In 18 months, 20 front-facing employees of color had been fired or reassigned. 0 white employees faced disciplinary action for the same offenses. The room fell into sudden silence. And then, the side door opened. Noah walked in, a thick file in hand. He placed it on the table and opened it, turning each page deliberately. Termination reasons, signatures of those responsible, witness statements, emails, and audio recordings. These are the people who were called wrinkles in the guest experience. And I'm one of them. Ethan tried to stand, but for the first time, he had nowhere left to stand. Ethan Kroll shot to his feet, face flushed red, desperate to reclaim the room like he had so many times before, with nothing but a sharp tongue and a rehearsed defense. "I built the entire high-end service system you're all enjoying right now. Upheld Maison Group's reputation for over 10 years. Noah met his eyes. No fear, no flinching. Not this time. "Number, you didn't build anything. You created a regime of exclusion, where standards were just a mask to justify discrimination. You didn't protect the brand. You used skin color to decide who was allowed to be seen by guests." A beat of silence. Then, Celeste pressed a button. The back doors opened. Reporters stepped in. Cameras already rolling. Ramona spoke, calm and precise. "We have submitted a formal request for a federal investigation into racial discrimination within Maison Group's management structure, and per the shareholders' petition, the company will fully cooperate with authorities. Ethan stepped back. Celeste stepped forward. On behalf of the principal shareholders, I hereby announce Ethan Kroll is terminated for ethical violations and breach of Maison Group's anti-discrimination policy. The shutters clicked. A man who once believed himself above consequence, now being escorted out by the very system he once manipulated, held by both arms. No more microphone, no more business cards, just a name stripped from the door. That afternoon, from a separate block of shareholders, a historic proposal was submitted to Congress. The Noah Act, a bill against racial discrimination in the service industry. And in the soft golden light of late day, Noah understood. The name once buried in HR error reports was now the name of what was finally made right. Months after the explosive lawsuit, a new sign appeared in a neighborhood once deemed unfit for high-end standards. The Bronx. Etched into a black glass facade reflecting the afternoon sun, a delicate swirl of French and Japanese lettering read, Sakura Noir, the black cherry blossom. The name was Noah's idea, a declaration in itself. If they once believed only white blossoms were refined enough, then we'll plant an entire garden of black ones and make it bloom beyond any standard they ever set. Celeste was the investor. Noah was co-founder and CEO, but the very first signature on a contract belonged to the woman who had spent 30 years mopping hospital floors, Ms. Laverne, Noah's mother, now head of cultural affairs. She didn't need an MBA. She brought 3 decades of grit, 3 children raised with dignity, and 1 sentence that made the entire room fall silent on opening day. I don't need anyone to call me ma'am or boss. I just want this to be the first place my son walks into, without needing to bow his head. Noah hugged her. He said nothing, but when he saw the first team of staff walk out, all shades, all sizes, all styles, he understood. He hadn't just opened a restaurant. He'd opened a door for everyone who'd ever been kept outside. And for the first time, luxury didn't come from leather chairs, crystal glasses, or French menus, but from the way people looked at one another as equals. Sakura Noir had bloomed, and no one would ever get to define its color again. Sakura Noir had been open less than 2 months, and reservations were already booked out 3 months in advance. No red carpet, no private VIP list, but it had something the most expensive 5-star restaurants in New York still couldn't buy. A genuine sense of welcome. The New York Times wrote, "This isn't just a restaurant. It's a place where dignity is served alongside the meal, where a brown-skinned chef doesn't have to overcome bias, but is simply heard because their food makes people cry." Noah didn't show up much in public. He often sat behind the glass wall of his office, watching guests come and go, as if to quietly remind himself, the very people who were once turned away are now the reason this place exists. Marcus, once a line cook demoted to dishwashing at La Tour de Verre, was now executive chef. Amaya, the server who was pushed out, now led staff training. And Ms. Laverne? Every morning she placed her hand on the glass door, smiled, and only then stepped inside to begin her work. 10 miles away, in a fast food joint, Ethan Kroll, now working as a night shift floor manager, quietly wiped down the counter. A journalist recognized him and asked, "What do you think about Noah, now being the most successful restaurateur in the Bronx?" Ethan said nothing. He nodded, lowered his head. There was nothing left to say, because for the first time, he no longer controlled the narrative, and the world had finally handed the pen to someone else. The Bronx afternoon glowed softly, sunlight dancing through gently swaying trees. From the second floor of the restaurant, Noah sat in his glass-walled office, tea in hand, eyes fixed on the sidewalk below, where a long line of people waited for their turn to experience Sakura Noir. No tuxedos. No one turned away for being off-brand. Some wore hoodies, some wore canvas sneakers. Some had just come off nail salon shifts, still streaked with polished smile. No scrutiny, no judgment. Celeste walked in, handing him the latest financial report. The restaurant had shattered its quarterly revenue goals in just 8 weeks. Did you ever think a place like this could succeed the way it has? Yes, Noah said quietly, but not because of the food, not because of the press, because for the first time, no one here has to apologize just for being born with the wrong skin. Celeste stayed silent. Every place that ever made me feel I wasn't good enough, I took that feeling and built Sakura Noir from it. Behind him hung a black and white photo on the wall. Noah, in his old server uniform, bent slightly, pouring water, but his eyes still held high. Beneath it, a caption read, "Sometimes the very thing that got you pushed out the door is what leads you to the place you were always meant to stay." And Noah knew. His journey didn't end here, because sometimes the one they looked down on the most is the first to rebuild the system from its roots. I used to think justice was a courtroom, a gavel, a verdict with a clear winner and loser. But after telling this story, I think differently now. Justice sometimes begins with a waiter quietly placing his hand on the shoulder of someone who's fallen, not for praise, not to keep his job, but because he thought, if I don't help this person up, then who will? Noah didn't bring Ethan down with power. He didn't seek revenge through rage. He won with patience, intelligence, and something the system had long forgotten: faith in the worth of a human being, regardless of skin color. And you know what? This world doesn't change because of the people with the loudest microphones. It changes because of those who dare to speak up at the right moment, even when no one's listening. So if you're in a place where people underestimate you, don't bow your head, because maybe you're not the one being kept out of the game. Maybe you're the one rewriting the rules from within. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If it touched something in you, share it, because who knows? It might be the reason someone out there finally decides to stand up for what's right.